Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Manoj Sahu and the entire organizing team for giving this opportunity. And I would like to thank Chairperson for giving the kind introduction. As my Chairperson was also talking about the role of EUS in submucosal lesion. So what I'm going to talk about, what is an importance of endoscopic ultrasound in the subepithelial lesion. And first of all, it is very important. Should we talk about, is it the subepithelial lesion or they are submucosal lesion? According to the ASG guidelines, subepithelial lesion is a preferred term because when you talk about submucosal, it appears like it is originating from the third layer of the gut wall. So when we describe in our endoscopy, we should always describe as a subepithelial lesion. Mostly they are present during a routine endoscopic examination. They present as an incidental finding. You are doing endoscopy for some purpose. While doing endoscopy, you pick up and you are not very sure what kind of subepithelial lesion it is. But they can present in subset of group as a GI bleed or dysphagia or obstruction and other symptoms. The estimated incidence is around 1 in 300 endoscopy. The majority of them are small, less than 2 centimeters in size. And mostly subepithelial lesions are benign like pancreatic rest, lipoma, leiomyoma, or schwannomas. But 18 to 15% of the cases, either they are pre-malignant or they are malignant in nature, like malignant GIST or metastatic disease. So 10 to 15% of the individual, they have either a pre-malignant potential or they are malignant in nature. And it is important for us to know this group of the patient, and EUS help in finding out this kind of lesion, which help in making the patient treatment at the right time. How can we evaluate the subepithelial lesion? As I said, mostly they are picked up on endoscopy or endoscopic biopsies, followed by endoscopic ultrasound, either done with the radial, linear, or forward viewing. And if required, you can take the tissue diagnosis EUS guided. Endoscopy, as I said, is the first evaluation because they picked up on routine endoscopy. And on endoscopy, you can roughly assess if there is a significant intraluminal component is there, then you can assess the size of the lesion. If there is no intraluminal component, if they are intramural or extramural, then it is difficult to assess the size on endoscopy. Again, shape can be assessed if there is an intraluminal component is there. Mobility can be assessed. Consistency by poking with either with the biopsy forceps, you know about the consistency, pulsation over it, color and the mucosal appearance sometimes give the idea about the subepithelial lesions. If the mass is ulcerated, you can take biopsy. Location sometimes also help. The nature of the lesion can be decided. But with an endoscope, it is difficult to differentiate an intramural lesion from the extramural. So in a bigger way, endoscopy has a poor specificity. Yes, you may be able to diagnose, the sensitivity is reasonably okay, but the specificity of endoscopy for diagnosis of subepithelial lesion is very poor. If you get an umbilicated lesion in the first part of the duodenum or in the stomach, you may say that yes, this could be a carcinoid. If you find in an esophagus molar tooth appearance, then you can say it could be a granulosa cell tumor. In fundus, if there is a pulsatile or the bluish coloration with patient has an underlying chronic liver disease, then possibility of a fundal varix. And if you get a yellowish soft lesion in the colon, which has a pillow sign on pinching with the biopsy forceps, the possibility of lipoma is there. But yes, it can give idea, but they are not accurate for diagnosis of the lesion. The question comes, should we biopsy all subepithelial lesion? Generally, the mucosal biopsies are not sufficient for diagnosis, and cystic and the vascular appearing should be avoided. Possibility of bleed can happen in patient of GIST, and those lesions which appear solid or ulcerated, you can biopsies. So if you are not very sure about the nature of the subepithelial lesion, I suggest it is important we should not take the endoscopic biopsy. Either you are getting the mucosal component or the patient, if it is a vascular or it is cystic, the chances of bleed and the rupture of the cyst is there. When we compare the EUS with the conventional imaging, these are two studies where the CT scan and the ultrasound was compared, and CT scan was able to pick up in 2/3 of the cases of the subepithelial lesion, while EUS was able to pick up subepithelial lesion in all. Similarly, with an ultrasound, the accuracy of ultrasound was 82% versus endoscopic ultrasound, which is 100%. And ultrasound can pick up extramural if the lesion is more than 3 centimeter, detection of the lesion if it is more than 2. So CT scan is mainly for the distant metastasis. With the CT scan, you may be able to differentiate about the extramural versus intramural, but as CT scan cannot give the layer of origin. So in 2021, for subepithelial lesion, I think the best test is endoscopic ultrasound, and if required, you can take the EUS guided biopsy. And why EUS is investigation of choice? Because it has the ability to differentiate intramural from the extramural lesion. The layer of origin gives the idea about the type of the submucosal subepithelial lesion. Echo level and the internal echo pattern of subepithelial lesion give fair idea about the diagnosis of subepithelial lesion. If patient has a local lymphadenopathy, you can take the biopsies. Doppler signals sometimes help to differentiate between a vascular versus non-vascular. If required, you can get that EUS guided tissue acquisition, which will be covered by my colleague, Dr. Surinder Rana. Elastography as well as contrast EUS also gives some idea about the malignant nature as well as the nature of the lesion, and you can do the targeted biopsies also. By this, it helps in determining the appropriate management of subepithelial lesion. The question comes, which scope should be used? So if the lesion is more than 1.5 to 2 centimeter, I think you can use radial or linear, anything. But if the lesion is less than 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeter, my preference is to use mini probe, especially if the lesion in the stomach. It is better to use the mini probe rather than using the radial and linear. If the lesion is large and this patient might require a tissue diagnosis, it is always better to use the linear echo endoscope, because it not only gives the characterization of the lesion but also help in getting the tissue diagnosis. So this is on endoscopy, there is a submucosal lesion, but when you do an EUS, you see the spleen is compressing, so you can very well differentiate, are you dealing with the intramural versus extramural lesion. As I said, why EUS? Because with the EUS, you can find out the 5-layer pattern of the gut wall, and from which layer the subepithelial lesion is originating, you can predict the nature of the subepithelial lesion. That's why EUS score over other imaging modalities. Now, EUS, it differentiates a hyperechoic anechoic from the hypo to mixed echoic lesion. Generally, the hyperechoic lesions are lipoma or fibromas, which originate from the 3rd layer. Anechoic lesions are full fluid filled, either they are vascular or non-vascular. So if you find an anechoic lesion, you put a Doppler. If Doppler signals are present, then it is mostly a ectopic varix. Or if cystic lesion without any Doppler signal, the possibility of a cystic lesion duplication cyst is there. For hypoechoic, isoechoic or mixed epithelial subepithelial lesion, the specific diagnosis is required because you want to rule out subepithelial lesion, especially the GIST, which has a malignant potential. These patients require a tissue diagnosis. Now, few tips about how to examine the subepithelial lesion with endoscopic ultrasound. What I do in my day-to-day practice, I do the 2-step with the 7.5 or 5 megahertz. I do a gross examination, the relation from which layer it is originating, and using the high frequency, it is better to find out about the serosal involvement or adjacent organ involvement. It is important your scope should be perpendicular to the subepithelial lesion. Avoid tangential imaging. Put a water, avoid air. You can give Buscopan if you are examining the stomach. Do not compress the submucosal lesion or subepithelial lesion with your transducer or by inflating the balloon, especially the smaller subepithelial lesion. If you compress, it is very difficult. Similarly, in the duodenum, it is very difficult to know about the layer of origin. If it is compressed with your scope, it is very difficult. And for layer of origin, it is always better you should start with the transition zone from normal mucosa to the disease mucosa. Disease mucosa means we are talking about the subepithelial lesion. So from the normal mucosa to the subepithelial, that is called as transition zone. You examine from there to know the layer of origin, and that help in making the diagnosis. Now, how can we make the diagnosis on the basis of layer alone? Mainly from the second layer, you find the leiomyoma or granulosa cell tumor. From the fourth layer, if it is a cystic, then the possibility of the, and from the fourth layer, generally the GIST, leiomyoma, or the schwannoma arise, or the glomus tumor arise. And when we talk about from the third layer, then there is a long list of lipoma, lymphangioma, fibroma, cyst, ectopic pancreas, and the Brunner-Masse, and the carcinoid tumor. Carcinoid tumor can originate from the second and the third layer. Similarly, leiomyoma can originate from the second as well as from the fourth layer. Generally, in the esophagus, if the lesion originating from the second or fourth layer, they are the leiomyoma, while in the stomach, if the lesion originating from the fourth layer, the possibility of the GIST is very high. When we talk about on the diagnosis on the basis of internal echo pattern, if the lesion is subepithelial lesion is anechoic, the possibility of a cyst versus lymphangioma, or a vascular lesion, if the Doppler signals are present, then possibility of a ectopic pancreas, or a fundal varix is very high. If the lesion is hyperechoic, the possibility is high, which is originating from the submucosa, is lipoma. It is, covered behind this bar, but the lipoma, which is hyperechoic, originating from the submucosa. So anechoic lesion are cyst, lymphangioma, or the vascular structure. If hyperechoic, the possibility of a lipoma or the fibroma, which is less hyperechoic, but the possibility is there. When we talk about the hypoechoic or isoechoic, you should compare with the fourth layer, or you compare with the liver and the spleen. The hypoechoic, mainly the carcinoid, GIST, leiomyoma, leiomyosarcoma, schwannoma, glomus tumor, fibroma, and the ectopic pancreas. But in our day-to-day practice, we come across with the carcinoid tumor, GIST, leiomyoma, and the ectopic pancreas. These are the four subepithelial lesions which we come across in our day-to-day practice. So I think the differential diagnosis on the basis of site, this is a list which is available in the books. You can read it. I am not going to go into the detail. But yes, EUS also help in differentiating a benign subepithelial lesion from the malignant. If the subepithelial lesion, which is especially originating from the fourth layer, if it is more than 3 to 4 centimeter in size, if the margins are irregular, if you find a cystic species, which is heterogeneous ecotexture, exophytic component with the lymph node, and if they are non-round, non-oval in shape, the possibility of a malignant subepithelial lesion or malignant GIST is very high. So if you see a lesion which is hypoechoic, originating from the fourth layer, which is more than 3 centimeter in size, irregular tumor margin, cystic species, heterogeneous ecotexture, and on contrast EUS, if you find a cystic species and the heterogeneous enhancement of the lesion, the possibility of a malignant GIST is very high. So what the data talk about us, what is the sensitivity and specificity of EUS? When we talk about EUS as a morphology, it gives the diagnosis in 45 to 83%. The accuracy is very poor. The sensitivity and specificity for picking up malignant lesion is 64 to 80%. So if patient has a 3 out of 5 features, then it is high probability that you are dealing with the malignant GIST. EUS guided tissue acquisition increases the diagnostic accuracy. Tumor size and the location are important factor in subepithelial lesion. Larger the size, higher the diagnostic rate. So EUS alone as a morphology is not very good. Roughly around 50 to 60% of the cases, it gives a fair idea about the diagnosis of the lesion. But to increase the accuracy, you require a tissue diagnosis. But definitely it is better than the CT scan or the MRI. Now I'm going to talk about the EUS feature of some common lesion, lipoma, which is soft and indented when you press with the biopsy forceps. That is called as cushion sign or the pillow sign. They are hyperechoic, homogeneous, originating from the third layer. And why it is important, if you find this kind of structure, then you know that this is a non-malignant and you don't require to repeat EUS. These patients don't require follow-up examination. So you have subepithelial lesion, which is hyperechoic. This is the musculus propria. In comparison to that, it is hyperechoic, originating from the third layer, no vascular signal, homogeneous. The diagnosis of the lipoma is there. You don't require to take biopsies and you don't require to follow up these patients. Similarly, if you find some lesion like this, which is tooth in appearance in the esophagus, that is called as granular cell tumor. Often they are mostly limited to the esophagus. They are generally small and they are hypoechoic, homogeneous, and originate from the second layer, again they are benign. The risk of malignancy is very low. You may not require to follow up with these patients. When we talk about the carcinoid which originate from the second layer, I think the carcinoid can happen in the rectum, duodenum, and the stomach. They originate from the second and the third layer, and they are chromogonin and synaptophysin positive. They have a malignant potential. If you find a carcinoid in the duodenum or rectum, they require removal. In the stomach, the type 3 carcinoids is required to be removed. Type 1, I think you can wait. When we talk about the leiomyoma, they commonly occur in the esophagus. You see a submucosal bulge in the esophagus. They arise from the musculus mucosa, that is second layer, or from the fourth layer. Sometimes it is difficult to differentiate these lesions from the gist if they originate from the stomach, and sometimes they may come across with the calcification, and you take the biopsy, they are c-KIT negative and the Desmin positive. Similarly, if you find an anechoic lesion in the colon, which is soft, anechoic to hypoechoic, they are generally chorionic lymphangioma, and they have a septa also. So if you find the lesion originating from the third layer, which is hypo to anechoic with the septum, the possibility of a lymphangioma is there. And if they are in the stomach, then you should rule out ectopic pancreas versus hematomas. Pancreatic rest, generally commonly found in the stomach, but they can be found in the duodenum. This is one of the cases where the pancreatic rest was in the duodenum, but commonly they are present in the pyloric antrum or the mid-body. There are two types, pancreatic rest, shallow type and the deep type. Shallow type, they are generally small. They are present in the pyloric antrum, and they don't require much of the follow-up, but yes, they can present as a bleed. The deep type, they are larger, usually seen in the body of the stomach. You might see the duct. So the pancreatic rest are basically type 1, type 2, and type 3. I'm not going into the detailed theoretical discussion, but generally they have a ductular anechoic structure along with the hypoechoic originating from the third layer with the irregular fourth and thickened fourth layer. The possibility of the pancreatic rest is very high, and these patients also don't require a long-term follow-up. Another common lesion which originate from the fourth layer, schwannoma, again they have a very low malignant potential. They look like gist. Calcification is rarely seen, but when you take the biopsies, they are S100 positive, c-KIT is negative, and they originate from the Auerbach plexus. So why it is important, the fourth layer, either it is schwannoma and leiomyoma or the gist. Schwannoma and the leiomyoma, they don't require any follow-up, while gist, they require follow-up and they have a malignant potential. It is important when you come across with the fourth layer lesion, you have to take the biopsy to prove that are you dealing with the gist, or are you dealing with the schwannoma, or are you dealing with the leiomyoma, and on that basis you can plan. And if the lesion is more than 5 centimeter, the possibility of a malignant gist is there. These patients may require neoadjuvant therapy. It is important to take the biopsies, and I think Dr. Surinder Rana is going to cover in his talk. Another important tumor is the glomus tumor, which is vascular, originating from the fourth layer. They are hyso to hypoechoic, and on biopsy they are SMA and vimentin positive, and they have a positive Doppler signals. So by that you can predict, are you dealing with the glomus tumor or other subepithelial lesion. When we talk about the gist, which is very important, I think this always require consideration, and gist are mostly found subepithelial lesion of the gut GI tract, which require treatment. The immunohistochemistry, they are CD34 and CD117 and DOG1 positive. They mostly arise from the fourth layer. Size of the primary correlate with the risk of metastasis. If they are more than 5 centimeter, risk of metastasis is very high. By putting the elastography and as well as by doing the contrast US, you can also predict about the nature of the gist, and these patients require definitive treatment. So they are CD34 and the c-KIT positive. They originate from the fourth layer. Generally, the calcification is not the feature of gist. They are more common in the leiomyomas, but you may find the calcification. Sometimes you may find the cystic spaces. So when you talk about the diagnosis, EUS diagnosis for the gist, EUS has a fairly high accuracy ranging from 80 to 100% diagnosis of the gist. either by EUS or by using the EUS and FNA. And it also helps in differentiating the malignant versus benign GIST. So just to summarize, the fourth layer lesion which is important, GIST, leiomyoma and schwannomas. GIST are positive for the c-KIT and CD34, while they are negative for the actin as NS100, and they have a malignant potential. These patients require close follow-up. So if the GIST is less than 2 centimeter, you can do the 6-monthly follow-up, or if it is less than 1 centimeter, you can do the 6-month follow-up. If GIST is larger in size, they require removal because they have a malignant potential. Leiomyoma is negative for the c-KIT and the CD34, but they are positive for the actin, while schwannoma is positive for the S100. So if you have a fourth layer lesion where you are not certain, getting the tissue diagnosis and doing the immunohistochemistry help in finding out the nature of the fourth layer lesion, and that can say that does we follow up this patient or should we go for the definitive treatment. Doppler signals are positive in patients of GIST, while they are very less and negative in cases of the leiomyoma or in cases of schwannoma. Similarly, elastography give the pattern. On qualitative elastography, if you find a homogeneous stain pattern, that favors about benign, but in the malignant lesion, generally it is heterogeneous. More blue is indicated towards the stiff, and sometimes you can do the elastography guided biopsies also. So elastography sometimes also help in predicting, are you dealing with the benign or are you dealing with the malignant subepithelial lesion. Look at here, this is a subepithelial lesion originating from the fourth layer. On elastography is complete blue. That favors that possibility of a malignancy is very high. When we talk about the contrast EUS, generally the contrast enhanced EUS is not practiced in our country. But yes, contrast EUS can help in differentiate between the malignant GIST versus benign. You look at the microvascular pattern, the sensitivity of picking the benign versus malignancy is around 78 to 100% with the specificity of 80%. And what you see in contrast EUS, you see the irregular subepithelial tumoral vessels, which shares about you are dealing with the malignant GIST, as well as it can also predict about the response to the anti-cancer immunitive drug. If the tumor is vascular, the possibility of response to the immunitive is very high. If you find a non-enhancing spot, that also favors about the malignant potential. So this is the study what they found. If the lesion is more than 3 centimeter with the non-enhancing spots or irregular vessel, it has a very high specificity of picking up the malignancy, that GIST is having a malignant behavior. Now for the better visualization, I have already covered few more things which I want to cover, that you should not compress the tumor with the balloon or by your scope. Give injection buscopan, instill water, avoid putting your water into the esophagus. If you don't have a mini probe, just with the water channel of the scope, you instill the water and you will get the good coupling between the submucosal and subepithelial lesion versus your transducer, and you will image the edge of the lesion to find out about the layer of the origin, and the echo pattern is important to give the idea about the nature of the lesion. When we talk about the tissue acquisition, I think Dr. Rana is going to talk, but just line.
Can we summarize? I think
forward wing scope help in getting the better forward wing scope with the cap. You can help in getting the better biopsy of the subepithelial lesion. So to summarize, ladies and gentlemen, EUS help in differentiating the extramural versus intramural lesion. In intramural, you confirm the layer of origin. If it is originating from the deep mucosa, if it is hypoechoic, that is third layer, hypoechoic on the basis of site, either it is a granular cell tumor, carcinoid, leiomyoma, deep biopsy can be done if it is not vascular, or you can follow up these patients, or you can take the EUS guided FNA. If the lesion originating from the submucosa, that is the third layer. If it is hyperechoic, the possibility of lipoma is there. If it is hypoechoic, possibility of pancreatic rest, inflammatory fibroid polyp or fibroma, and anechoic generally are the cyst, which is duplication in cyst. If there is an atypical EUS feature, either from the third layer, you can do the unroofing and you can do the biopsies, or you can do the EMR and ESD. But if the lesion originating from the fourth layer, which is less than 1 centimeter, you can follow up. But if it is 1 to 3 centimeter, do the EUS FNB rather than FNA, do the immunohistochemical marker, and you can plan, does this patient require surgical intervention or not? If the patient has an ulcerated lesion, you don't require EUS guided biopsy. You can take the biopsy from the edge of the lesion. Thank you for the patient's hearing.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Surinder Rana, Professor of Gastroenterology at PGI Chandigarh. And at the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Manoj and Dr. Avinash and the members of the organizing committee for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to participate in this great academic conference. We have just heard a beautiful lecture on role of endoscopic ultrasound in evaluation of submucosal lesions, and in continuity of the same, I'm going to talk about role of EUS, FNA and FNB in evaluation of patients with submucosal lesions. We all know that when we have submucosal lesions, we have three aims to achieve. First is to have an accurate diagnosis. Second is to predict the behavior of the submucosal lesion, whether it is a benign lesion or whether it's a malignant lesion or whether it's a potentially malignant lesion. And in case we have a lesion which looks like to be malignant, we have to plan a medical treatment, especially imatinib for patients with stromal tumors. In that case, we need to look at the receptor profile of the lesion. Now, when we have endoscopy, EUS, and cross-sectional imaging like CT and MRI, why do we need a biopsy in submucosal lesion? I think like for all other diseases, in submucosal lesions also, the tissue is an issue, because the differential diagnosis of submucosal lesions, as we have just heard, encompasses both non-neoplastic as well as neoplastic lesions. And when we do an endoscopy, we all know that the endoscopic evaluation of that lesion is not diagnostic. And majority of these lesions are out of the reach for a conventional endoscopy biopsy forceps. The only situations where endoscopy may be diagnostic is if there is an ulcer and you target that ulcerated area of the lesion and you may get a diagnosis. Or if you have a low risk lesion which has a characteristic endoscopic appearances like a pancreatic rest located at the greater curvature of antrum, or you have a lesion which is quite obviously looking like a malignant lesion and surgery is planned, for example, a large and ulcerated mass like a high-grade gastric cyst. All other lesions, endoscopy and biopsy is not diagnostic. What about using a jumbo biopsy forceps? The studies have shown that with use of jumbo biopsy forceps, the diagnostic yield increases to about 50 to 80%, but it is still far away from satisfactory. Now we have EUS with us, but we know that in many circumstances, the differential diagnosis of submucosal lesion is not straightforward with EUS evaluation alone. EUS will tell us that it is from which layer of the GI wall the lesion is arising. But then they just look at example of an hypoechoic submucosal lesion arising from the fourth layer. The differential diagnosis encompasses from a potentially malignant lesion like a GIST to a benign lesion like leiomyoma, schwannoma, and then you can have other mesenchymal tumors which can have a varying malignant potential. So just by looking at the layer from where the lesion is originating, we may not be able to get a differential diagnosis. And as an endoscopist, it is very important for us to accurately predict the behavior of lesion. Some of the features which might help us is the location of the lesion. We know that the lesion which is located in esophagus has the least malignant potential, in contrast to lesion which is located in duodenum. Then we have heard beautifully about the various EUS features and contrast EUS features that can help us in differentiating between benign and malignant lesions. But the problem is if these features are not present on EUS, it still does not rule out a malignant or a potentially aggressive disease. Now, just recapitulate how do we approach a submucosal lesion. Once we identify a submucosal lesion on endoscopy, naturally we'll do an estimation of size, its appearances, but again, it has got a very poor sensitivity and specificity for accurate differential diagnosis. Many of these lesions undergo an endoscopic biopsy, but as I've just told you that endoscopic biopsy, the yield is very low. Thereafter, we look at the size of the lesion. If the lesion is less than 1 centimeter, we just do an yearly follow-up. And if the lesion is growing, then only we do an EUS. On the other hand, if the lesion is more than 1 centimeter, an EUS is to be done. And first step is to find out whether it is an extramural or an intramural lesion. And if in an extramural lesion, then you work up the patient as clinically indicated for an extramural lesion. In contrast, if it's an intramural lesion, we look at the EUS characteristics. Hyperechoic lesions by and large are benign, so you follow up only in selected cases where there is a clinical suspicion of a malignant lesion, because majority of them would be either a lipoma or a fibroma. If they are anechoic lesions, you put a Doppler. If they are Doppler, it's vessels. Most of the time, these are varices. And if it's a Doppler negative anechoic lesion, these are cystic lesions. Again, the malignant potential of an intramural cystic lesions is very, very less. The problem arises when the lesions are hypoechoic or have a mixed echogenicity. In these conditions, you have to decide whether to straight away proceed with surgery or do a tissue acquisition. Before I talk about tissue acquisition, it is important to understand that all submucosal lesions do not need a tissue acquisition. Tissue acquisition is needed when you have a submucosal lesion with a presumptive diagnosis based upon imaging of an unresectable gist, for which a tyrosine kinase inhibitor is contemplated. In that situation, you need to do a biopsy to look at the CD117 status. Patients who have a previous history of a malignancy with a submucosal tumor, and now you are suspecting it to be a metastasis, then again a tissue acquisition is required. And then finally on EUS, you think that it could be a lymphoma or a neuroendocrine tumor, then again a tissue acquisition is needed. However, tissue acquisition is not needed if the submucosal lesion is symptomatic, for example, with pain or with bleeding, and surgery is anyway needed. In that situation, tissue acquisition is not needed. If there are typical echo features, that is hyperechoic lesion of a lipoma, and then small, less than 2 centimeters submucosal lesions of esophagus and stomach, by and large are benign. If you have a typical EUS features of a benign lesion, then tissue acquisition is not needed, and these lesions need to be on a serial follow-up. However, I have to admit that for duodenal and colorectal submucosal lesions, we don't have any sufficient data to suggest any recommendation. So whether to acquire tissue or not should be individualized in any patient based upon the size, EUS appearances, and the symptoms. Before we go on with the tissue acquisition, it is important to do a good EUS, because the strength of EUS is its capability to guide the choice of optimal tool of tissue acquisition. For example, if there is a small lesion which is lying within the second or third EUS layer of GI wall, it can be completely resected by an endoscopic mucosal resection, whereas large lesions with EUS criteria for malignancy are best referred to surgery. So it can help you to decide the way how to acquire a tissue acquisition and which lesions can be directly referred to the surgeon. Now, what are the tools of tissue acquisition? Just to recapitulate, we have forceps, which are endoscopic biopsy forceps, where we use bite-on-bite technique, unroofing techniques, endoscopic resection techniques, and then we have EUS-guided fine needle aspiration or a fine needle biopsy, and finally we do surgery also as a means of tissue acquisition. But the important thing to understand is that for submucosal lesions, we need to have a sufficient amount of tissue so as to perform immunohistochemistry, because the diagnostic features as well as the prognostic features depend upon the IHC features. So the aim of tissue acquisitions is to acquire a sufficient amount of tissue to have a cytological diagnosis, perform immunohistochemistry, and do a mitotic count, because the number of mitoses will tell us about the behavior of the lesion. And if you look at air-dried and alcohol-fixed slides, we can only do a cytology. And hence, if we are doing a fine needle aspiration, it is also very important to have cell blocks, because on cell blocks, we can perform immunocytochemistry. And if you are doing a fine needle biopsy, have a tissue core to perform the immunohistochemistry. Role of endoscopic biopsy has already been highlighted. The mucosal biopsies are usually insufficient. So bite-on-bite technique, where you go on digging from the site of biopsy, having 2 to 8 bites using a conventional sized forceps, the diagnostic rate is very poor of about 38%. And moreover, it can lead on to fibrosis, which may negatively impact the future resection technique. Hence, bite-on-bite technique is usually not preferred in the current times for tissue acquisition. The jumbo biopsy forceps are bigger biopsy forceps, but again, the diagnostic yield is about 50 to 80%. What about EUS FNA? It is a very promising technique because it's a real-time tissue acquisition. How do we do it? You take one slide which is fixed by air drying, stained with modified Giemsa stain and examined on site for specimen adequacy. The other slides are fixed in alcohol and stained using PAP technique. And then you have to take a cell block material which is fixed in 10% formalin, embedded in paraffin, cut thinly, and then stained with H&E stains. And the diagnosis is established by doing a smear cytology, histology, or a cell block analysis, and immunohistochemical staining of cell blocks. Although looking very promising, there are a number of problems with the EUS-FNA for submucosal lesions. The first and foremost is the diagnostic yield is still about 70 to 80%. And the problem is for smaller lesions less than 3 centimeter, the diagnostic yield is much lower. 40 to 50% for lesions measuring up to 1 centimeter and 60 to 70% for lesions measuring 1 to 3 centimeter. And we all know that these are the lesions where we require an accurate diagnosis because they don't fit into any strict criteria for surgery. And we may be able to differentiate between a benign and a malignant lesion, but EUS-FNA has a very poor diagnostic yield for determining exact type of benign lesion being present. And then to increase the diagnostic yield, we need ROSE also, which increases the cost. And the diagnosis of malignant GIST by cytomorphological findings alone is very limited. And hence, EUS-FNA has a very limited role in prognosticating the GIST. And then there were prospective studies which have compared EUS-guided FNA versus bite-on-bite biopsy techniques, and they didn't find any significant difference in the diagnostic yield between the two techniques. Now, how to improve the diagnostic yield for an EUS-FNA? One is to obviously use ROSE, as we know that ROSE increases the diagnostic yield for EUS-FNA. And then what's the impact of needle gauge? The study evaluating 22 and 25 gauge needles found a similar diagnostic yield, but when we use a 19 gauge needle, the diagnostic yield significantly improves over 22 and 25 gauge needle. And then whenever you are sampling a patient suspected of GIST, it is important to use a negative suction pressure to get a sufficient tissue, because studies have shown that the GIST cells tend to have tight to tight cell adhesions. So with suction, you tend to have a better yield. And then obviously you have to prepare a cell block to do a immunocytochemistry. Now, since there were limitations of an EUS-FNA in the diagnostic yield, came the role of EUS-FNB. We know that these are novel FNB needles which have been developed to overcome the technical limitations of fine needle aspiration needles as well as the true cut biopsy needles which came in between. There have been various designs like reverse bevel needle, fork tip needle, and leading sharp tip needle. The advantages of these needles is that you have a ability to obtain specimen which is suitable for histology as you get a tissue core, and there have been very encouraging results from the EUS-FNB done from the lymph nodes and pancreatic tumors. What about submucosal lesions? The studies have reported technically similar and equally safe as FNA with better tissue acquisition that is achieved with fewer needle passes and hence improved diagnostic yield by immunohistochemistry. This is a recent meta-analysis which has been published on the role of EUS-FNB for submucosal lesions, which included 10 studies and 669 patients comparing FNA versus FNB. The diagnostic accuracy for submucosal lesions was significantly better with FNB sampling. FNB required fewer number of passes to establish the diagnosis. And importantly, the histological core procurement was significantly higher for FNB as compared to FNA being 89.7% versus 65%. Similar results obtained from a large multicentric study again published recently in GIE. It is a 229 patients who underwent 115 underwent FNA and 114 underwent FNB. The cell block for FNB required fewer passes to achieve the diagnosis. The number of passes were not different for ROSE adequacy. Immunohistochemistry was more successfully performed in FNB samples as compared to FNA samples. So they concluded that EUS-FNB is superior to EUS-FNA in diagnosis of submucosal lesions. Also importantly, EUS-FNB is superior to both FNA alone as well as combined FNA and ROSE because of its ability to procure the tissue core for immunohistochemistry. So is it that EUS fine needle biopsy is a panacea for diagnosis of submucosal lesion? Unfortunately, the answer is no, because as we started using FNB more commonly, we realized that the diagnostic yield for EUS-FNB for lesions which are less than 2 centimeter in sizes again 75 to 80%, in contrast to about 95 to 98% for lesions which are bigger than 3 centimeter. So there have been few attempts to increase the diagnostic yield of EUS-FNB. One way is to use a forward-viewing echoendoscope where you get an end-on view of the submucosal lesion, but again, the results have not been so convincing. The core biopsy was still obtained only in 65 to 75% patients with small lesions, and the prediction of behavior of GIST despite using EUS-FNB still remains a challenge, and the cost of needle is again another important factor which is important in countries like ours. So just to recapitulate, what's the role of EUS guided tissue acquisition? Again, this is a submucosal lesion. On EUS, you find it to be a complex cystic lesion. The problem with EUS is that when you have large lesions, it is very difficult to accurately find out the layer of origin of these submucosal lesions. But here it appears that it is arising from the fourth hypoechoic layer or the muscle layer. But since it has got an atypical features, its size is about 4 centimeter. We did an EUS-FNB and it turns out to be a cystic GIST. And this patient underwent surgery with a Ki-67 index of 12%. So it's a potentially malignant GIST. Again, a submucosal lesion in duodenum. On endoscopy and biopsy, you're not able to get any diagnosis. You do an EUS, you again find a submucosal lesion which is of a variable echogenicity, hypoechoic and hyperechoic. So whenever you have a mixed echogenic lesion, you have to get a tissue to find a diagnosis. On a Doppler, it is hypervascular. And when we did a EUS guided FNB in this lesion using a 25 gauge needle, this was a metastatic renal cell carcinoma. This patient had undergone a nephrectomy 10 years ago. On the other hand, when you have such sort of appearance, well-defined hypoechoic lesion arising from the second muscle layer, that is muscularis mucosae, most of the time these are lipoma, and this was confirmed in the EUS guided tissue acquisition using a 22 gauge FNB needle. Now again, here you see it's a gastric submucosal lesion of a variable echogenicity arising from the fourth layer, clearly documented on the zoomed image. Here we do a contrast EUS, and when you do a contrast EUS, you find there is a homogeneous uptake of contrast. So this suggests a possibility of a GIST with a low malignant potential. We did a EUS guided FNB with a 22 gauge acquire needle. The cytology was suggestive of a spindle cell tumor. On IHC, it was CD117 positive, suggestive of GIST. The mitosis were 2 per 20 high power fields. You don't have so much sample that you can calculate 50 high power fields. The Ki-67 index was 2%, again suggesting a low malignant potential. This patient undergoes a wedge resection laparoscopically, and the final histology, the dimension is 3 centimeter, fairly corresponding to the EUS calculation of the size. The histology is GIST, which is spindle cell type. Mitotic count was less than 5 per 50 high power field. There was no necrosis, no lymphadenopathy. CD117 was positive. DOG1 was again positive, a marker for GIST. SMA, a marker for leiomyoma, was negative. Ki-67 was 2 to 4%. And risk assessment was low risk. So fairly corresponding to what we got with a EUS-FNB. Another example, now here you see it's a submucosal lesion arising from the fourth layer. Now it has got a variable echogenicity, necrotic areas. Although it is well defined, these features suggest a possibility of malignant GIST. This patient undergoes a contrast enhanced endoscopic ultrasound, and then you see large tumor vessels. When you see these large tumor vessels on contrast, it again suggests a possibility of malignant GIST. This again patient undergoes an EUS guided FNB. It's a high Ki-67 index, and finally the patient undergoes a surgery. It corresponds with a diagnosis of a potentially malignant GIST. But then how to best acquire a tissue from small submucosal lesions? This is a new technique which is coming up, a recently paper published in Digestive Endoscopy of a mucosal incision assisted biopsy, where you partially remove the mucosa and expose the lesion and take a biopsy. And this has shown very encouraging results in smaller submucosal lesions. And this is again a recently published paper where it's looked at the diagnostic yield of 3 techniques, FNA, FNB, and mucosal incision associated biopsy. For smaller lesions, the mucosal incision associated biopsy is best. As the size increases, the gap between FNA, FNB, and MIAB decreases. So for a larger lesions, maybe you can get a diagnostic yield better with FNB, but for smaller lesions, MIAB is better. So to finally conclude, We have learned that some mucosal lesions which are indeterminate after endoscopy in EUS, they are a diagnostic dilemma. Small hypoechoic lesions of second and third layer, endoscopic resection may be considered because it will be curative as well as diagnostic. The larger lesions, we know that EUS FNB has a good diagnostic yield. However, smaller hypoechoic lesions of fourth layer, which are measuring between 2 to 4 centimeter, are a challenge currently. If you have features of benign lesion both on EUS as well as contrast EUS, a follow-up may be indicated. However, if there are worrisome features, then tissue acquisition, either using a mucosal incision associated biopsy for lesion less than 2 centimeter and 2 to 4 centimeter EUS guided fine needle biopsy. We still do not know how best to manage GIST, which are less than 3 centimeter in size. So once we understand the natural history of these lesions much better, we may be better able to give an idea of how to manage them. And then EUS guided through the needle biopsy forceps and confocal laser microscopy are promising results, promising techniques. The initial results are very encouraging, and we need more data from prospective and comparative studies. Thank you so much for your patient hearing.
Surendra Rana, it was a wonderful lecture on the utility of this EUS guided FNB in tissue acquisition, particularly the subepithelial lesions. I'll also invite the co-chairpersons and the panelists for a panel discussion, which will be for the next 10 minutes. Dr. Chalapati Rao and Dr. Satish Rao are here. I think Dr. Shiran Shetty is unable to join us because of some personal issues, and I invite the chairpersons also to join. We'll quickly go through if there's any questions in the chat box. Right now, we don't see any questions. So to begin, to Chalapati and Dr. Satish, and I'll request Dr. Rana and Dr. Puri to pitch in with their comments also. So now we have heard both Dr. Rajesh Puri and Dr. Surendra Rana discuss about the utility of EUS and subepithelial lesions. Dr. Chalapati, how commonly do you see in practice, like where you need or where you are referred for EUS evaluation of the subepithelial lesions compared to all your, references for endoscopic ultrasound in a day-to-day practice? How often do you get to see these things?
Yeah, it is common to have a referral because most of the times it is because of the patient's anxiety that they get, when there is a swelling, it is reported on endoscopy. So that is one reason, but commonly we get like weekly some 3 or 4 cases from outside referrals we get. So in my practice pertainingly to that, 1 or 2 cases in every 200 to 250 procedures we get some lesions, commonly in the esophagus or in the distal antrum, like that usually.
Right. So given that we just heard Dr. Puri also discuss about the utility of EUS as compared to a cross-sectional imaging like CT or MR, the data that was initially shown, that was all were like imaging or the of CT of generations in the early 2000s or in the late 90s. With the current generation, CT and MR, majority of the times they're able to tell them that, even they're able to tell us that this is just more likely with all the complexities, which layer they're coming out from and all that. We know that CT is good for distant metastasis, but with the current generation CT, do you think it's also building up, or they're able to tell us more about the layers from which it is coming from? Dr. Satish, what do you feel?
Most of the times nowadays, patients are coming with CTs only. After when the endoscopies are done, almost most of this outside physicians or surgeons usually will do the CT. Then after that, they will refer for a EUS most of the times. And I feel CTs may not able to pick up all the features, especially if the lesions are very less than 2 centimeters. And in these cases, EUS is required.
Okay. Dr. Puri, would you like to add anything more? Like the data that you showed, Dr. Puri, you're muted. Please unmute yourself.
What be described on the CT scan or MRI?
Sorry?
Yes, I think the layer of origin on the basis CT cannot give the idea about the layer of origin. Yes, if the lesion is larger, more than 3 centimeters size, it can predict the nature of the lesion, because the common tumor which we encountered is either a cystic lesion or a leiomyoma or the GIST. Pancreatic breasts generally don't be picked up on a CT scan or so. So the common subepithelial lesion is GIST, which require a treatment. Yes, CT can fairly give the idea. But if you look at the GIST also, you require a tissue diagnosis or a direct surgical intervention.
Right.
So if you require a tissue diagnosis, you have to go for an EUS examination. And EUS definitely had an upper edge. You do a CT, you see there's a subepithelial lesion, probably GIST, no metastasis. And subjecting this patient for the wedge resection of the gastric body, generally the surgeons are also interested to confirm. And as I said, fourth layer lesion could be a leiomyoma, or could be a glomus tumor, or could be a schwannoma. Schwannoma has a very low malignant potential. So I think adding, because if you talk about the literature, fourth layer lesion, how is EUS impact on the basis of CT scan, we don't have data up to my best of knowledge.
Right. But how good is
when we
EUS
talk about
also?
the clinical practice, when we talk
Yes.
about the clinical practice, majority of these patients go for the EUS examination and will require a biopsy, because you can plan the treatment. And that's my take on this. Rana, would you
And
like-
another question to you about how good is EUS in looking at the layers? Like, I mean, there are sometimes you have, I mean, we tend to overestimate or, underestimate the layer from which it comes from, isn't it? Or, I mean, what is the trick that you would like to tell, like, to the people who hear?
Question to me?
Yes.
So, yeah, this is very important. As I said, to know about the layer of lesion, you have listened to the talk from Dr. Surinder Rana, large lesion, which is exophytic, difficult to differentiate from which layer it is originating. But the best trick is you do the transition zone from the normal layer to the subepithelial lesion, from
Right.
where you put a water, examine from there. That is number one. Try to compress, because what we have learned in EUS, we try to remain very close to the subepithelial lesion, and we compress the gut wall. And number third, we compress with the inflated balloon also. So you should be in the center of the lesion, or you should be at the corner, at the transition zone. Better is a transition zone, but center is also give the fairly very good idea if the lesion is not very big in size. If the lesion is 5 centimeter, keeping perpendicular center is also not going to give. The transition zone is the best. If the lesion is 2 centimeter or so, keeping your scope perpendicular in the center also give the layer of origin. Put water, give Buscopan, distend the stomach. That help in knowing about the nature of the lesion. If you are not very sure, I think mini probe is very good to give the layer of origin, and especially in the small lesions. The problem arises only in the duodenum in my practice, where it is sometimes difficult, but you fairly see the fourth layer, and you can comment that is the lesion originating from the second and third, which is a difficulty, but fourth layer origin from the duodenum is also very easy.
Right. Now, moving on to the tissue diagnosis part, Dr. Rana has beautifully given us the role, but where the EUS helps. But for the, I'm putting being a devil's advocate, is EUS FNB getting obsolete, or the indications are going down, as we hear from what Sir had to speak? Because with the advent of third space endoscopy, EMR, ESDs, majority of the third layer lesions are being taken out with ESDs and STIR and whatnot, and EFTR, which has come up now for muscle layer lesions. So Dr. Chalapathy and Dr. Satish, what is your view? I mean, how are things going to be in the next 5 years from now? Where do you think EUS FNB as a role for tissue acquisition in such subepithelial lesions?
As you told, it is some of the recent literature show that it's still controversial whether to take a biopsy in some lesions or not. But still, I feel that in the small lesions, maybe around maybe a 1 to 2 centimeter lesions, EUS FNB will have some edge over the before any definitive procedures, I feel.
Dr. Chalapathy, what is your take on this?
Yeah, I feel like coming to the future, I think still FNB has a role, especially in GIST like tumors where neoadjuvant therapy is needed, unresectable tumors. But probably we have moved from taking a colonoscopic biopsies for polyps. So we straight away resect them. That is mucosal. So similarly, since we have advancements in resections of the submucosal lesions, probably there is a good advantage if we do a procedure like STIR or EFTR. That might take the lesions in toto. So that is also curative. This is going in line with the surgical principles. So that can give you the margins, that can give you a lot more tissue, that can clear the tumor like that. So for lesions around 2 centimeters, around that, I think STER and EFTR has a good role, and for symptomatic lesions, and probably the role of FNB might come down.
Okay, sure. Thank you. I think Dr. Rana, your final comments, and then we conclude
I
this.
have one question.
I think we are just running short of time. We got our things. So, Dr. Rana, your final comments on the role of FNB, and then we'll wind up, please.
Yeah, I think the point you raised is quite valid, but you have to understand that STIR and ESD are therapeutic procedures. They are meant to relieve the patient of the symptoms. So obviously in a symptomatic patient, you have to decide between surgery and STIR or ESD. The question arises in an asymptomatic submucosal lesion where you have to get a diagnosis as well as prognosticate the lesion. As I've already talked about, lesions which are less than 2 or 3 centimeters, we still don't know their natural history, whether we need to treat them or not. So question of STIR and ESD will not arise for diagnosis. It will arise probably for the treatment of this lesion. And tissue acquisition, again, one has to take everything in totality, the clinical picture, the endoscopic appearance, and the treatment plan. And then you decide whether you want to do a tissue acquisition or not. And if tissue acquisition is to be done, then it is dependent upon size, as I've already told you. Any lesion which is more than 3 centimeters, FNB has got a very good diagnostic aid.
Thank you so much. Thank to both Dr. Rajesh Puri, Dr. Rana, and to all my co-panelists and chairpersons for this wonderful lecture and panel discussion. I think we'll move over to the next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.